Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everybody. I'm Preacher Moss, host of the S.O.S, the Shout Out Show. Welcome to another edition of Throwback Thursdays. Hope you guys are having a wonderful Thursday as it leads us into the weekend. We hope we can be a part of that transition, if you will. Today's topic, brothers and sisters, is something that's near and dear to me, but I'm sure it's near and dear to everybody, man. The idea of education. And today's throwback topic is remembering the importance of an education. I'll say it again, remembering the importance of an education. What I didn't put in here was not the remembrance of a good education or bad education, but of an education. A lot of times when you put those adjectives on, we purge. We're not purge, but we prejudice the education system. A lot of times there's so many aspects that go into it, society where it is, conditions, economics, uh, religion, things like that. And I'm talking about education, not just here in the United States, but around the world. The idea of educating young minds in one level and then educating adult minds at another level as well. See, a lot of you thought just because you saw these kids behind me, and there are some beautiful kids. Take a look. Those are some wonderful kids that the classroom somehow stops when you're in sixth grade or 12th grade or college or your master's. The world is a classroom. In the Quran it says, "Did I not create a world wide and expanse for you?" And I think that's one of the greatest quotes I ever heard in terms of a religious edict because it's talking about the aspect that knowledge is investigated and knowledge is investigated, not investigated, but also it's invested in. I look at the knowledge process as an investment, brothers and sisters, and sometimes we overlook what that investment is. So I thought it'd be cool on this show, and as with other shows, if we begin to look at the procedural aspects of what education is, a good education, a bad education, because we don't really want to say it a lot of times, but education is life or death. When I was growing up, you would hear things like a mind is a terrible thing to waste. My mentor, Mr. Harry Weber, came up with that campaign. He was an advertising exec on Madison Avenue in New York City. He's one of the few first black ad executives on advertising executives in New York City. And I asked him about that ad, the United Negro College Fund, which said, the slogan, a mind is a terrible thing to waste. And I said, what was the significance of that ad? I said, why did you put it out? And he said, you have to understand that up until that time, it wasn't even perceived that black people could think. And he said to put it out in an ad reminded people, if you will, of the thought process that had gotten us this far. Also, the thought process that needed to be grown and expanded for us to keep moving forward. So, big shout out to Harry Weber. So, I want everybody to kind of step back a little bit, and I want you to think about your education, not just in school, brothers and sisters, but how you peruse and structure education for yourselves for current times. How are we looking at educating and expanding educational opportunities, but also educational perspective? Some of the greatest teachers are not in the classroom. There are a lot of them in the classroom, but some of the greatest teachers are our own experience and how we react, if you will, and reshape educational experiences and life experiences, whereby we can promote the good or the best of us that we can promote, as well as protect and inspire in many regards model the best of who we are, because these things are so needed. So I'm going to make sure that we get on these things, brothers and sisters, and we're going to have a good show. I'm going to ask you in advance for your patience, because sometimes there are a lot of aspects to talking about education. And when I say talking about education, I mean in a very robust way, but in a way that it has, as my old teacher used to say, education, good education leaves breadcrumbs. And when she said breadcrumbs, what she meant was when people bend down and pick up the breadcrumbs, it's an investment. So I'm going to the best of my ability, mimic and borrow some of the strategies and tools and skills that I learned from my mentors about education. And we're going to have just a general talk. And it's a throwback, brothers and sisters. It's a throwback, not so much to good education, bad education, education overall, but also the fact that it has evolved. In some regards, we've evolved with it. So the Throwback Thursday here is also to appreciate educational process as well. So, without further ado, thank you guys so much for joining. We're going to go ahead and kick the show off. Preacher Moss, shout out show. Let's roll. And we are back. I'm glad everybody's tuning in. As always, if you're coming on the show for the first time, we appreciate you dropping in. Hope you stay on with us. We as well as appreciate you. We ask that you stay on. This community is a thriving community. When I say a thriving community, I don't mean by numbers. I mean, I really enjoy the intellectual growth of the people on the show, the questions that they ask. And sometimes it might be a pushback or a challenge sometimes, but I appreciate that because it makes this experience, so much more fulfilling, so much more complete and diverse. And we get topics on here like our Throwback Thursday topic, remembering the importance of an education. There was so many memories that came out when I started thinking about that. I always talk about my famous sixth grade teacher, Miss Alvita Jones from Seabrook Elementary, but I've missed out on some of the other teachers, some of my big brother Reginald Kitchen, my parents, of course, the natural teachers, but the Harry Webbers and people that sat me down when I was an adult and told me about, hey man, this is life beyond what you think it is. And they were very generous. When I say very generous, I mean they would sit you down and tell you things about your historical or your personal journey that lacked context in some regards because you were looking at it from just your lens and you didn't really have the historical imperative to back up a lot of what you were feeling, what you were experiencing. So it's going to be one of those shows. So if you're coming on the show for the first time, kick back. I invite you to put your responses in the comment section. Get your shout out either way. This is a shout out show. We appreciate everybody. Everybody's going to get their shout out. So do that. If you get a chance, you like the show, the routine, subscribe, notification, hit all those buttons. Don't hit them at all. We at 168 subscribers, brothers and sisters. And I say 168 because I appreciate it. I really, literally appreciate it because that's people who've taken the time to look in every once in a while to see the show. They might not see the show, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter on my end because I appreciate it all around. So that's my spiel for anybody coming on the show. For my regular folks, my shout out show family, my shout out show soldiers, the stars in the building, can't stop, won't stop. So let's go ahead and get them on here right now. First of all, of course, we got Sister Reed. Sister Reed is our craft services director, our show dietitian, making sure not only the food is good for me, but the topics are good as well. Sister Reed, thank you so much for being a long-term member of the Shout Out Show family, and we appreciate you and thank you so much for your support. Next up, we got Sister Aika. Wa alaikum assalam rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Belated Eid Mubarak all the way. We know you from Indonesia, sister. We say Indonesia all the time. Thank you so much. We hope that you're getting better, your family's getting better. For those that don't know, major outbreak of COVID-19 because the vaccination levels are very low over in Indonesia. So we hope on this side of the water that our brothers and sisters are protected and COVID not do the damage that it could do. So I'm going to make sure that I'm going to pray that that's not an issue and that people recover, because COVID is nothing to play with. All right. Thank you so much, Sister Ika. Next up, Altaf Rashid. Wa alaikum assalam rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Better known as Mr. 6 o'clock, straight up, straight down, always on time. Our Canadian ambassador to the show, my brother. I'm sure you're going to have some good reflections on education because education never stops. Education never stops. So we appreciate you being on the show. Make sure that quality control for the S.O.S. does not dip and is suitable for American audiences and Canadian audiences. My brother Altaf Rashid, we appreciate you. Thank you so much. Next up, we have our consultant producer, Sister Satana Whitfield, in the building. We appreciate you, sister. Making sure everything goes well. A lot of people don't understand when you have a show like this and you do 400 some episodes. It's not by luck. It's not by luck. And when I say it's not by luck, it means we started out with a format we didn't know what the format was. And you grow, and here it is, the importance of a good education. We grew a product, we grew something whereby people could be comfortable coming on the show and speaking to us. That's a big thing. A lot of times, people, when we give shout outs and people give their comments, a lot of folks don't understand that that's an acquired skill, not just for us on the show, but the people who come on the show that feel comfortable. Because you want to create a community platform, if you will. And sometimes shows don't do that. I'm happy to say that we have that. But it doesn't happen by accident. Sister Satana has been here since day one of the fun, making sure that the show happens. Believe me, every show, brothers and sisters, we don't just run off to our lives at 5:35. Sister Satana makes sure that we have some type of production meeting and we go over the quality of the show. Was it a good show? Was it a bad show? What did we miss? Because sooner or later, brothers and sisters, this thing will get soon, finer and finer tuned, whereby it's going to be crack, it's going to be whip, and it's like when we really put it out there, we want it to be top flight. So shout out to Sister Satana. And shout out to J2, who will not be on the show today because the Milwaukee Bucks won the NBA championship. I'm sure he's still stuck downtown in traffic with that doggone parade. And that's everybody. JT, his mom, his aunt, his sons. I'm giving all of y'all a pass for not being on the shout out show today because it's been 50 years since the Milwaukee Bucks won the championship. God bless you. If I had time and energy, I'd have been in myself acting a doggone fool. So big ups to that. So today, let's talk about remembering the importance of an education. I said earlier at the beginning, at the opening monologue, that I didn't want to categorize it as bad education, good education, because you can start out with a good education and wind up with a bad result. The same way you can start out with a bad education and wind up with a good result. The idea, brothers and sisters, is that we engage ourselves in a process, number one. We frame what that process is and what we want it to be, number two. And number three, we engage that model or that modality, and we have to have the humility to come out and say whether something works or something doesn't work. One of the larger imprints of public education, particularly at my age or people my age and my generation, was that we thoroughly believed that education, we lived to see that education was a pathway forward. The generation before me, my mom, my dad, they saw it as a pathway forward, but they came out of a space where it wasn't so much. Segregated schools, things like that. And even to go overseas in present times, when you go to places like Afghanistan, you talk about the Taliban not allowing young girls to go to school because whatever that foolishness was, that malarkey. It is interesting that education in its base form is threatening. It's threatening. It threatens us, brothers and sisters. Now, how you perceive a threat that's the difference. When I say it threatens us, I looked at education when I was younger. It threatened to make me smarter. It threatened to give me the tools to really go out and look out in community, look out in creation, go, wait a minute, I'm a part of this. I have power, if you will. I have agency in this situation. The ability is to learn how to answer questions, the ability to look at a situation, to ask the right questions, to investigate. These are all things that happen before you even get to school. These are the tools and the blessings of a young child, if you will, that looks at the environment and goes, how do I work this environment to the point where I have efficacy in this environment? It starts with the cry. A baby is hungry. They can't go, yo, I'm hungry. I could use some. You good? Would you mind going to get me something? It doesn't happen like that. But in a baby's mind, which is honestly, brothers and sisters, a very selfish mind, because the baby is in its space and it learns to engage action and people around it. And it learns to manipulate things. It senses, if you will, and allows that child to understand that I have a place in this world. And this is how I act to make sure that I survive in my particular space. Nothing wrong with that. It's a beautiful thing. And then you go to school and you get formal education that teaches you how to further engage in aspects of institution, corporation, education. But here's the thing I really want to speak about when it comes to education. How do we value it? What is interesting is that every generation has had a different valuation of education. I can only think back to young people who were in schools that were log cabins, and the teachers want the best teachers. And what they taught a lot of times, outside of reading and writing, it was tied into religion, religious dogma about how you were to react with God, engage with God. And that it's interesting because you now see the space whereby education, particularly in this situation scenario, this environment, is somehow taking a hit. It's somehow taking a hit. We're not talking about education and information anymore. We're talking about misinformation, which is miseducation, if you will. There's a great book by Carter G. Woodson called Miseducation of the Negro. And if you haven't seen it before, you haven't read it before, I would suggest you read it because it's really counterfactual to everything the African American, the Native American has been told about being a citizen in this world. And the miseducation, brothers, is that we tie ourselves into systems that we don't necessarily build, that we don't necessarily have investments in. There's more pressure to be a part of that system than to build your own. And when we're talking about education, true education, brothers and sisters, incurs risk as well as reward. A true educational merit system, brothers and sisters, says that we can fail this much, but we can succeed this much. But you see how I'm doing this? It's still on a balance. It's still on a balance. And a lot of times when a lot of us were teachers and we were in classrooms, we concerned ourselves with balance. If you always want to know why there's a core curriculum for young kids, is that we keep them balanced, that we give them educational nutrition, if you will. So you're going to get some reading, and you're going to get some writing, and you're going to get some math, and you're going to get some social skills. You're going to understand about the government. You're going to get some PE. You're going to get some arts, and this is what I grew up with, a music program, if you will. I never forget my music teacher. I couldn't stand that lady. I used to be the biggest jerk to this woman. Her name was Miss Ross. And I couldn't stand Miss Ross. And when we get into music class, we would cut up because we knew Miss Ross, as angry as she may get, she wasn't going to call the principal on you. She may get upset, but she wasn't going to call the principal. And if she wasn't going to call the principal, she wasn't going to call Miss Alveda Jones, and Miss Alveda Jones wasn't going to call Miss Mary Moss or Mr. Clifford Moss. So Preacher Moss was in the catbird seat. There was an auction, a fundraiser, though. There was a fundraiser at the school. And the fundraiser, and I'm going to tell you about education, and the fundraiser was a raffle. And people, they bid on stuff. And I don't know how it is my mom did this, but one of the items up for sale or for raffle auction, if you will, the auction is the right word, was an evening with Miss Jones. And my mom spent $20 on an evening with Miss Jones. And I was hotter than fish grease. I'm like, how you going to have me with this white lady at her house? I want to be in her classroom. I want to be at her house, Mom. Mary, you done dropped the ball. My mother said, I spent $20 on here. She said, if it was a slumber party over that white lady house, you was going. I said, God be dang. That's what I said, my inside voice. My mom was right there. I ain't said with the outside voice. And I went to Miss Ross's house. And she says, what do you want to do? And this is how the mindset works, brothers and sisters. Good education, bad education. What do you want to do? Nothing. You sure? Yeah, I don't want to do nothing. Nah, I'm lying, brothers and sisters. I'm playing an instrument. I'm listening to jazz. I am denying the educational process. I'm sitting with a woman who is a musician. And I'm all up in my feelings about this white lady. And all my other friends are like, oh, you going to Miss Jones? You going to Miss Ross' house? They were laughing at me and all of that. And Miss Ross said, hey, here's a record. And I'm like, this white lady gonna play some Catholic music. You know that old Damien No Omen music that you they're gonna get you. Um, um, that lady put on Miles Davis' Bertha Cool and got by the piano and started playing along with it. And my mouth had dropped. And I'm like, you a middle to old white lady playing jazz. And she looked at me and says, would you like to play the piano? It was an invitation. See, good education is an invitation. And she took me over to the keyboard and she said, you play saxophone. And she reminded me of the keys and the sharps. And I'm not saying we had a jam session or I became an overnight sensation with the piano, but just that little piece about chords, brothers and sisters, changed my whole perspective about this lady. For those that don't know, I wasn't a great math student. The things that got me through in math were actually jazz, timing, use of space, dissonance, all those type of things, understanding chords. So the mathematicity, the physicality of jazz music tied into the physicality of how I learned advanced math, algebra, geometry, linear geometry, all that type of stuff, calculus. And it helped me learn these things. My greatest math teacher was Thelonious Monk. And you sit here going, here I was berating this woman in class. I mean, I gave her the blues. And all she wanted to do was share this information with a bunch of black kids who would get up in class. If you put on go-go music, we bang on the table, not understanding that it took a skill to bang on the table because we didn't associate that sound with education. And summarily, we still do it sometimes. We still do it sometimes. I can be guilty, but the whole idea of education, brothers and sisters, is that it's access. It is access. You know, for all the believers, you can read the Torah, you can read the Bible, you can read the Quran. Doesn't mean you ain't gonna make bad decisions. Doesn't mean that all your decisions are bad. Doesn't mean that you won't make good decisions. But it's also about the level of education, how you take that information in. And education is not so much just about information, it is also about processing. Some of you guys are really, really creative. Some of you have analytical minds. Some of you have very creative minds. Some of you are very, pragmatic and stuff like that. And all of that works. But the impetus of importance of a good education is that we learn process. Like I'm a big person about process. When I listen to a jazz album per se, I may have to listen to the jazz album 15 to 20 times to truly appreciate it. Why? Because I have to listen to every part of the jazz band that's playing. I listen to opera. I'm a big opera guy. Well, I listen to opera because I have to understand and appreciate the person that gets on the middle of that stage who may not have a microphone, and the acoustics of the venue is the thing that makes the opera beautiful. If you put a microphone in front of it, it would kill the whole vibe. Same thing with symphony music. I'm a big guy with gospel music. I watch gospel bands. Why? Because I have to understand the placement of people in a band as well as their particular responsibilities musically to the overall process that they're giving to the people. Because people come to be not just entertained, but educated by what product is being put out there. So I would really like to say in some regards that the importance of education is that for me, it may be different for you. The importance of education is that we learn process, not just learn process, but appreciate process. And it's a humbling thing. It reminds me that as right as I could be, that's how wrong I could be. And trying to find a peaceful middle ground, as I say, the radical middle way, it does create a balance. The same as when we were in school and you had to learn all these subjects. You get to college and they call it electives. But when you're in junior high school, the elementary, those are core classes that you're going to take. Of course, as you get older, you can choose your courses and everything. But for this situation, brothers and sisters, as we sit here and we talk and we have this brief exchange, if you will, I think it's really important that as we look at education, how do we process things? I am thoroughly interested in people who process things more differently than I do. I like to figure out what's in that pot of gumbo that they're eating to get them to this point. As a comedian, one of the things I love and the game I play with other comedians is I watch a set. I like to guess wrong because I learn more. And maybe we're a culture that's gotten away from learning how to appreciate, if you will, guessing wrong. Maybe the things that we have stuck in our mind about an individual or action, we're afraid to be wrong. I like being wrong if it means that we're going to get to a greater good. If my way of thinking only gets us half the way there, but your way of thinking gets us 75% of the way there, I'm excited. I'm excited because I'm part of a process and I can look at somebody and be educated. Too often, brothers and sisters, the saying that got too many cooks in the kitchen, or the other saying, too many chiefs, not enough Indians. It makes sense. Everybody can't be right. Can you imagine in religious tradition, everybody was a prophet? Everybody had revelation. Everybody has Islamic information. Everybody was a religious scholar. Anybody could be a preacher, a priest, or a reverend. And the delineation is that people make choices in terms of how they're going to educate themselves for the things they believe in. And even here, as we talk about process goes back to furthering, engaging, and growing what you believe in. So, like I said, I'm not perfect, but the importance of education, brothers and sisters, has levels to it. And it has levels to it in the individual levels. Again, processing for yourself. How do you get information? Also appreciating a process that may not even be yours. That's the thing about information in the universe. As Mr. Dick Gregory used to tell me about the universal God. He said that he's so generous that he gives you information every day of your life, even though you are a complete idiot. And he loves the idiot in you. He loves the idiot that comes to you and you say, I don't know how to do this, but I'm willing to learn. And somehow, somewhere out of the universe comes education. We learn how to talk, we learn how to write, we learn how to love, we learn how to cry, we learn how to hug each other, we learn how to deal with disappointment, we learn how to deal with failure, we deal with money, we lose money, we're rich, we're poor, we're up, we're down, we're happy, we're sad. We live and then we die. And even in death, brothers and sisters, if you have done it right in your process, people will learn from you. So let's go ahead and jump on the end, brothers and sisters. That's our importance. Hey, Kareem, how you doing? Eid Mubarak, good to see you. Wa alaikum assalam to barakatuh, JT. I gave you an excused absence because I thought you were still down at the parade, the Milwaukee parade. I watched it on TV, on the internet a little bit today. Congratulations again to the Milwaukee Bucks. Check that out. Sorry about that, brother, sister. I get that brother call. But listen, thank you guys so much, JT. I do owe you a call. We haven't had our Milwaukee Bucks NBA championship call, so I'll make that happen. So let's get to our sponsors. Our sponsors are, of course, BeFinanciallyIndependent.com. Again, that's BeFinanciallyIndependent.com. I talk about education, the importance of good education, the importance of a good financial education is really important too, brothers and sisters. So make sure you check that out. If you don't want to go to the website, call again 1-888-496-6845. Again, that's 1-888-496-6845. And you can also give a holler to, you guessed it, Bayan Islamic Graduate School. If you're thinking about a quality Islamic graduate education at the graduate level and the doctoral level, make sure you go to bayanonline.org. Again, that's bayanonline.org. Brothers and sisters, that's our show for today. I appreciate your patience. Hopefully, we'll see you tomorrow on Friday Funnies. I'm your man, Preacher Maz. God bless. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. See you tomorrow. Yo, assalamu alaikum. I'm Preacher Moss, comedian extraordinaire, but I like to add a new title to my name. I'm Professor Preacher Moss. You know why? Because I just graduated. Wait a minute, let me get this out of here. This is okay. I'm Professor Preacher Moss, and it's come through the courtesy and the blessing of the Muhammad Ali Scholarship, which came through Bayan Islamic Graduate School. Now, listen, I know a lot of you people are thinking, can I do it? Yes, you can do it. This is the part where I know I'm supposed to say it's easy. It's not easy. Listen, it was easy to get this degree. Trump would be a mufti. I digress. Listen, though, for you brothers and sisters that are interested, go to bayanonline.org and you could be like me. Put yourself in the picture for Islamic education. Wait a minute, there's the picture right there. Sound like them, everybody. Take care. Preach them off.